Okay, we are on Daf Kof Gimel, a very exciting daf. It's going to lead into a very interesting discussion about writing on Shabbat, and then the whole Agadah about the letters and shapes of the letters. We'll see a little bit of the history of them as well. But we're starting by completing the first Mishnah of the Perek. We started the new Perek, and they mentioned that a building, even any amount, is Hayav. And we saw a klal that anyone who does melacha, melachto mitkayemet, if it's enduring. In other words, if it's good enough that you might even leave it that way, even if there are more steps, then fine. But if it's just a temporary item, like just a temporary scaffolding or clamp or something, then that would be patur. So that's a klal. And then the Rabban Gamliel adds something about if you strike the hammer onto the anvil, he thinks that is also hayav, because it's ke mitaken melacha, although you're not applying the hammer to the object that you're building itself. Okay, so those were the last two items in the Mishnah, and now we can discuss those. Zaklal, atuyemai. What is it coming to include that that we might not have known if it didn't say it in this formula? Dehak kefiza bekaba. If I carve out, if I have a block that could hold up to a kav of volume, and I hollow it out only 3/4 of as much, so I'm not getting the full capacity, that would be chayav. Because I might leave it that way. Even if I'm not getting the full capacity, it's still pretty big and is still very usable. And so someone who's a little bit lazy might just leave it like that and use it. Therefore, that's called something that's mitkayem. Whereas if it was only half chiseled, nobody would stop there a half chiseled block and leave it that way. Okay, so that's an example. Rabban Shaban ben Gamliel omer, "Hamakeh bekurnos ala sadan." My ka'avid, what is he doing if he's just hitting the hammer on the anvil? Rabba, we only know what anvils are from cartoons, right? Oh, anvil always falls on someone's head. Otherwise, we'd have no idea what they look like. Rabba v'Rav Yosef damre talvai hu mipnei she'amen et yado. You're training your hand. You're getting like a golf swing. You're just like kind of making believe before you do it. You want to get the swing of the hammer checked out. So it's training. Kashuba bener Hava. Hava was a sage himself. He had two sons from Haifa who were also sages, and they said that this doesn't make sense. If I'm watching someone doing something and learning how to do that craftsmanship, is that also chayav? I mean, it's just training. It shouldn't be chayav for training. This is like the question always comes up when Yom Tov is during the week and someone wants to go to their college class and just sit and not take notes and just learn, right? So what was that? Is that any problem? So why should that be a problem if I'm not actually working on anything? I'm just learning how to do it. So a different answer. Sheken meradede tase mishkan osin ken. Well, actually, they did do this. It has a useful purpose. When they made flat sheets of metal, of gold, because there's something like the Aron, which was encased in gold, they have to make them very flat. And they would strike on the metal 3 times, and then once on the anvil, just to smooth out the hammer itself. Otherwise, it would make dents in the metal. And so that was part of the productive process, is hitting on the anvil. And actually, we have a braita that backs this up. Tanyan mehachi, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, af hamakeh bekurnas alsa mishat melacha chayav sheken beradede taseh mishkan osin ken. So it's the same Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and he has the halacha and also the added explanation. So there you go. Abai and Rava were successfully transmitted the correct explanation from Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Great. We have now next Mishnah, Choresh Kolshu, making a furrow, even a little bit of a furrow in the ground, just a little hole. That's called plowing. Hamenakesh hamekarsem v'hamezared kolshehu hayav. Taking out weeds, because that's going to help everything else grow. So that's kind of like planting, right? You're helping things grow. Removing dry branches or pruning. Pruning is taking off good live branches, but you don't need them there. And so that gives the plant strength and other places to grow. All these are helping it grow, so they're all chayav because of zoreya. Im lehesek kedei lebashel besa kala. But if I cut off these branches, not to improve the plant, but rather because I want to make a fire, I want to cook them, well, then there would be a bigger amount, not kol shehu, but rather enough to make a little fire that I could fry a kotevet worth of an egg. Melaket asabim, gathering just grass, im letaken kol shehu. If I'm gathering this grass, the weeds, or to enhance the plant or to enhance the land to make it look nicer, then even the smallest amount. Im la behema, if it's for food, animal food, kim lo piagidi, goats eat grass, and so it would be enough to eat for a goat's mouthful. Okay, so that's all the minimum shiurim. Now we ask, what is such a small furrow for used for? I mean, what would you plant in a tiny hole? It's one bizid, one little pumpkin seed you could plant in there. You might just plant one stalk because you want to make a dye. And to make a dye, you don't need a lot of it. You're not eating it. You're not making a salad. And so even one seed in one furrow will be enough. All different kinds of pruning. So taking out different kinds of endives or prune reeds. These are different weeds. If a person is going to eat it, then it's a fig size. If an animal is going to eat it, a goat's mouth. If you're going to burn it, enough to cook a part of an egg. If it's to make the land look better, if you're doing gardening and you want to look nicer without those weeds, then even the smallest amount. Now we ask, that's the Braita, which basically says very similar to the Mishnah. We ask about this Braita. All of these are going to make the land look better. I mean, even if I'm going to use it for food, maybe that's my primary intent. I'm going to use it for food. But isn't it also making the land better? And if so, it should be chayav kol shehu, no matter what. We're talking about in the swamp. So I'm just going to the swamp. I don't care what it looks like. I'm not trying to make it look nicer. I'm only picking it for food. And that would be the case of imla achila, imla behema, or imla hesek. Abaye amar, afilu tema besadeh delavagam, uchegon delam kamechaven. No, I can even say in a field, in my field, and that's not my intention. So I go by my intention. Although it will make it look nicer, my intention is to get enough to eat. And so, therefore, right, it all goes by what I intend to do. Who said that? Abaye? Abaye also said that he agrees with Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says that even if I don't have intention to do that melacha, it would generally be patur. Unless it's pasik rashe, unless it's definitely going to happen, right? So if I want to take a chicken's head and give it to my kids to play with, well, I'm not mitkaven to kill it, but it's definitely going to die, right? Pasik rashe velo yamut. Even Rabbi Shimon agrees that is prohibited, and so too here. Although my intention is to get enough grass to feed the goat, but inevitably it will make the land better. Although that's not my kavanah, it should still not be allowed. Oh, it must be talking about a case of it's my friend's field. I went to my friend's field and I took some grass, hopefully with his permission, to feed my goat. In that case, I don't care if my friend's field looks nicer, right? And so therefore, that is even less than the pasik rashe velo yamut. It's pasik rashe de lo ichpat le. I don't care, not de lo nichad. I mean, he just doesn't care if his friend's land will look better or not. And therefore, in that case, Rabbi Shimon would agree. Okay, so that's very important in terms of halacha about what you define pasik rashe. If you also benefit from the side effect that's happening that you're not intending for, or you'd rather not happen, or you don't care about it. All comes up with that. Okay, now we get into writing, which is very interesting. Hakoteb shete otiyot ben bimino ben bismolo. If you write with your right hand or your left hand, I wonder why why not? If you can't, most people can't write very well with their left hand. So we'll think about that. Ben mishem echad ben mishete shemot, whether it's the same letter or two different letters, right? If I write aleph aleph or really gimel gimel, it does have to be a word. Let's assume it has to be a word. So you write gag, that's two letters are the same, or two different letters like aleph bet av. Ben mishete samaniot, whether two different kinds of inks, that would be like from the root samemanim with the dagesh and the mem doubling it. Another interpretation, samaniot comes from siman, two different signs. In other words, even if it's not a letter, just a sign would be chayav. We'll see if that makes sense in the context here. It does seem to make sense because ink, we're not talking about inks, we're talking about different kinds of letters. But the question is, like, does it have to be a legible word, a word that is meaningful, a meaningful word, or any sign, any symbol? Bechol lashon chayav, in any language, also chayav, right? And that would be also the question. In another language, does it have to make up a word or any two symbols? Okay, that's all Tanakama. Okay, we're going to try to remember all the opinions in the Mishnah because we're going to have a Baraita that's going to add more opinions and mix up some of these opinions. So it's good to keep them straight. Okay, so far, Tanakama said two of the same letter, like Gag, would be Chayav. Amar Rabbi Yosef, lo chayavu shetei otiyot ela mishum roshem. The melacha is not actually writing. So you know what? It doesn't matter if it spells out a word. It doesn't even have to be letters. It's just about roshem. It's marking. Shekach kotbin al kasher mishkan eda ezo ben zugo. On the posts of the Mishkan, they would write Aleph and Aleph next to the two adjacent ones, and Bet like you do in your Sukkah. So you make sure next year, remember which pole goes where. They did that in the Mishkan to remember which one went where. They make different symbols. So you see that it doesn't have to be an semantically significant word, but rather any symbols. That's Rabbi Yosef. So if we say samaniyot here means symbols, and that would seem to agree with Rabbi Yosef. So instead, if you said it means different inks, then that would be a different story. All right, we're going to try to figure out the relationship between Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef. The Talmud is going to say it's the same person. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Masinu Shem Chatan Mishem Gadol. He has an interesting case. What if I intend to write Shimon? So Shem Mishimon Umishimuel. All right, I'm writing Shin Mem, and then I get distracted and I go away. Did I violate? I wrote Shin Mem, and that by itself is a melacha, right? Is a word. And so therefore he says that's enough. Or Noach minachor dan midaniel gad mi gadiel. Even if I only write that much, two letters, and I don't write the full word that I intended to write, it doesn't matter because it's an understandable word. So I think from these examples of Rabbi Yehuda, you see that it has to be a meaningful word, not just two symbols. So Rabbi Yosef is certainly the most machmir in saying any two symbols at all. Rabbi Yehuda is certainly more mekel than that because it has to be a semantically significant word, although it can be just part of a word because inevitably if you're writing the whole word Shimon, you're going to write two letters from it. And it's not clear, according to the Rabbi Yehuda, what if you wrote two of the same letter? Notice all of his examples are different letters, right? What if it was some kind of a two-letter name that had the same letters? It's not clear. But should we understand that he disagrees with Tanakama, who says two of the same letter, right? In that case, he would not be okay with two of the same letter. Perhaps even if it spells a word, two of the same letter is just the same letter twice, and so you got to write something different. Just two different letters, in order to be chayav the melacha. Okay, so I think it's very interesting how the meaning of the word, is it just the number two? Is it the intention of what you're going to write? All right, bishlama ayamin lechayev. Now back to the beginning here, right and left. I understand writing with the right, mishum derech ketiba bechach. That's the way people write, righties anyway. Ela semol amai. Why should be chayav writing with the left hand? Ha and derech ketiba bekach. That's kila hariyad. It's not the normal way of writing. Amar b'yirmiyah b'iter yad shanu. That's talking about a left-handed person. So a left-handed person who writes left-handed, and not a right-handed person. It's giving you both options. Then you should just say the right hand, and I'll know that to apply the left hand to the right hand, and so you should be patur. A left-handed person should be patur if he says the right hand, but the Mishnah says both, so that doesn't fit. It's an ambidextrous person. That's what it's talking about. That's who's chayav. But you're right. For most people in the world who are only righties, they would be patur if they wrote with their left hand.
So did this Mishnah not hold of Kila Haryad?
Either that, or they thought they agree with Rabbi Yosef that it's a marking. Yeah, but so we're going to say right now. If it's just a marking, then you normally would make a mark with your left hand just fine. Rav Yaakov bered debat Yaakov. It's interesting. His name is Rav Yaakov, and he's the son of the daughter of Yaakov. Who's his father? We don't know, but she says he was a bad guy, and so we don't want to mention him. So instead, we name him after his grandfather, his mother's father, which is actually a good halacha l'maaseh. If someone has a father who's mumad or unknown father, then you can use the grandfather's name from the mother's side. Okay, Hamani Rabbi Yosehi. This Tanakama is Rabbi Yoseh. It's about marking, not about writing. Hold on, it says Rabbi Yoseh in the middle, so that means the Tanakama is not Rabbi Yoseh, no? No, Kula Rabbi Yoseh. It's all Rabbi Yoseh. It's just putting together two different sections, and although this was the name of Rabbi Yoseh, but this is also in fact according to his shita. Okay, so according to that, then that would make sense that it's not really about writing, and so the left hand could be. Maybe you could also say, since it is a normal way of writing for many people, so it's writing with the hand. It is a normal way of writing. Okay, maybe it's different in a culture where lots of people were illiterate, couldn't write. Maybe it would be. I don't know. They thought of it differently than we do. Okay. So so that's Rabbi Yosef. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, now we're going to get to the complicated bit. Rabbi Yehuda Masino Ella Rabbi Yehuda Shete Otiyot Vehen Shene Shemot Hu Demechayev. So Rabbi Yehuda, he's the one that said if I write Shin Mem and I didn't finish writing Shimon, I'm Chayav. So all those examples were two different letters. So this seems to imply that Shete Otiyot Vehen Shem Ehad Lo Mechayev. If it was the same letter, then that would be Patur. Right, that seems to be what he says. It's only implied. It's not. It really doesn't say that. But from the context, he's different. If you want to say he's different from Tanakama, he's all saying a different. I don't know if there is an example anyway of a name that's part of a bigger name that has two of the same letter. Okay. Anyway, that's what we are assuming. He implies that two of the same letter would not be chayav. Ve'hatanya, we have a braita where he says the opposite. Ve'asa achat yachol ad shechtov kol Hashem. So this is a pasuk that we have seen before. Asa achat in Vayikra. I'll show you the pasuk. This is introducing the korban hatat. Nevesh kitechata bishkaga mikol misvot Adonai. So he makes a sin inadvertently, and then the mitzvah shed lo tasena, and he lo taseh. Ve'asa me'achat mehena, and he did from one of them, right? You see, it is the wording is surprising. Or what does it mean? It could have just said achat or said achat mehena. What's me'achat mehena? So the Midrash is going to say usually words are kind of inclusive types of words or exclusive types of words. So meh something means only part of it and not all of it. Although achat sounds like a whole thing. Henna sounds like many. So is it one? Is it many? Is it part of it? Right. So this confusing language is going to get interpreted in several ways. So that's what we're starting with. Doesn't have to be that I'm writing the full word, the full name that I intended to write. Am I only chayav for sewing if I finish sewing the entire piece of clothing? If I make an entire sieve, even a part of something, a part of one melacha. So if I say it's part of it, then how much is part? Even the tiniest part, even one letter, even one loop. Even if just one eye of a sieve, if I'm putting it this way and that way, this would be one of the warps that I put into the woof. Would it be even one? Tamodomad achat. So it says the word achat. So I have a tension, achat and me'achat. So how do I resolve this tension? Achat haketzad, אינו חייב עד שיכתוב שם קטן משם גדול, שם משמעון ומשמואל, נוח מנחוד, דן מדניאל, גד midaniel. I have to write something. It can be a part of a whole thing. I don't have to write the whole name, but it has to be something that is a unit in and of itself. And that would be like Shin Mem from the word Shimon. Okay, if you remember, whose opinion was this in the Mishnah? The Mishnah said this in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Shem Mishimon. Okay, in the Braita, it's Tanakama. And the Braita adds a derivation. Okay, so that's Tanakama. Now Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu lo katav ela shete otiyot vehen shem echad chayav kegon shesh tet rad gag chach. Even if I write two of the same letter, these are all meaningful words. The number 6, or to give, rad bibsaro, something exuding from his body, or a gag, a roof, or chach benezim, a type of jewelry. So here the Yehuda says even two of the same letter. This was Tanakama in the Mishnah. So what happened here in this Baraita, Tanakama and the Yehuda are switched. Okay, I think we can actually explain this somewhat simply. This does happen sometimes, even often, that if you look in the Tosefta or Braita and the Mishnah, the names are switched. Sometimes it happens because I would assume the Tosefta or the Braita in this case is the earlier one. And in the Mishnah, because Yehuda Nasi wants one of the opinions to be the halacha l'maaseh, he'll switch the opinions and make one of them the majority. So that could be a simple explanation of what happened here, but that's not what the Bavli is going to say. The Bavli is going to record this as a contradiction that the Yehuda in the Mishnah says you have to write two different letters, and here he says you can write two of the same letter. Okay, now we're going to have to solve this, but first we're going to finish the rest of the Baraita. It's a pretty long Baraita, so just remember the question, and we'll come back to it. Rabbi Yosef says here in the Braita is the same as what he says in the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yosef, "V'chim mishum kotebu chayav." Are you saying it's not about writing? The whole melacha is about marking, not writing. Because they did that in the Mishkan to put the beams together. Even if you make a scratch or two scratches, and you know the other one that has two scratches that goes on there, that will be enough. You see that why with the left hand would be fine also. It's not about writing, so this is a little bit more elaborate, but same as what's in the Mishnah. And now we get a bonus of another opinion of Rabbi Shimon. He says another derasha on V'asa Achat. His derasha sounds very much like the Tanakama's derasha. Well, we'll see what the difference is between them. V'asa Achat, yachol ad shichtov et kol Hashem. It says Achat, meaning doing a melacha. Does that mean doing the entire melacha? Ad shelo kol habeged, writing the full name, making a full piece of clothing. Ad shelo kol hanafa, making a full sieve. Tamod lomar me'achat. The mem is coming to as a diminution, only part of it. Me'achat yachol afilu lo katav ela ot achat. Does that mean just one letter? Afilu lo adag ela chut echad, even just one thread. Afilu lo asa ela bayit echad benafa, one loop in making the sieve. Tamod lomar achat. It also says achat, which means one whole thing. So which is it? Hakesad eno chayav ad sheyaseh melacha shekayoseh ba mitkayemet. I have to do melacha that another melacha that's like it would endure, which is actually what we said in the previous Mishnah. Regarding building, the zeh halal, only something that will endure. So to here, right? The point is, if I write shin mem, it seems to come to the same point. If I write shin mem, I might leave it like that and say, oh, you know what? It says I meant to say to write Shimon, but I can leave it. It's a word. I'll let it stay as the word Shem. Whereas if I write just Sheen or Sheen, nonsense, some other letter that doesn't make up a word, I would never leave it like that. That's not considered writing because it's not a word. So he ends a little bit differently, but it sounds like very similar to Tanakama. Okay, and then Rabbi Yosef comes back. Rabbi Yosef already said this, but he comes back because he wants to disagree with this derivation, and he's going to apply this pasuk to something else because he said it even even a scratch and a scratch is considered not writing, but that's the melacha of marking. So what about this pasuk He uses it for some other things. Rabbi Yosef Omer, ve'asa achat, ve'asa hena. פעמים שחייב אחת על כולן, פעמים שחייב על כל אחת ואחת. So before you put the mem on, me'achat mehena, just the words by themselves, I can learn something. Achat and hena is sometimes I have to bring one, chayav achat, I have to bring one chatat off on all of them. That's if I forgot today was Shabbat, and I do all the melachot, I bring one korban for all the melachot that I did. So that's that case. And sometimes I have to bring on each and every one. That's in the case where I knew it was Shabbat, but I forgot about all the melachot. I didn't know that they were asur. And so that's each and every one of them. Okay. So that's the end of the Baraita. We're going to elaborate on each section. But back to the main reason we brought the Baraita, which is Rabbi Yehuda. Katane miha. Rabbi Yehuda omer, afilu lo katab ela shete otiyot vehen shem ehad hayav. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said has to be two different letters, or implied that. And in this Braita, it says explicitly two of the same letter. Lakashya, hadide, the Mishnah is his own opinion. Hadirabe, the Braita is not his own opinion. He is quoting his teacher. The Tanya, yet another Braita says, Rabbi Yehuda omer mishum Rabban Gamliel, mishum, in the name of Rabban Gamliel, his teacher, afilu lo katab ella shete otiyot vehen shem ehad, Hayab, Kegon, Shesh, Tet, Rar, Gag, Chach. So in the name of Rabban Gamliel, that's he says two of the same letter. But his own opinion was that it has to be two different letters. Okay, so we solved the Biyuda. Rabbi Shimon, Hainu Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon, who said, achat and me'achat, only if something is endures, that would be the same as saying shin mem from Shimon, because that is something that's mitkayem. So isn't that the same thing? What was his chidush? V'chitema aleph aleph te'azercha. Pasuk in Yeshaya that has this word, azercha, I will engird you, right? Like ezor motnecha. It starts aleph aleph. So let's say I just write aleph aleph and then I stop. Maybe that would be a difference between the two. The Tanakama Sabad, Aleph Aleph Tazircha Lo Mechayev. Tanakama of the Braita says it has to be Shem Mishimon, it has to be a word. And Aleph Aleph by itself is not a word. And so he would say Patur. Rabbi Shimon Sabad, Kevan Deite Beglatore Be'alma, Chayav. Sometimes you write Aleph Aleph in amulets. It doesn't make sense, but in amulets you write all kinds of magical formulas that are not sensible words, but this is something that is written there, and therefore could be mitkayem. I might leave it. I wrote aleph aleph. I stopped, even though I meant to write azercha. I'll leave it because I can include that in an amulet that I'm going to write. So it's about being semantic. According to Takama, it has to be semantically significant. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's just that I would leave it because it has some use. Okay. If you say that, then it would solve the problem, but raise another problem, that Rabbi Shimon would be more machmir than Tanakama, because he would say aleph aleph chayav. Tanakama says aleph aleph is not a word, and patur. Could Rabbi Shimon be machmir? He's always mekel in Ochot Shabbat. And here another braita that he said that we see he's mekel. Hakodeach kol shehu chayav. Drilling a hole, any size hole, chayav. Megadel kol shehu. Scraping any amount, me'abed kol shehu, tanning any amount, hasar bekli surah kol shehu, drawing something, any amount is chayav. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon omer, ad she'igdach et kulo, ad she'igror et kulo, ad she'abed et kulo, ad she'asur kulo. He says, no, you have to finish the whole thing. Drill, make the entire hole. Scrape the whole thing. Tan it all, draw the whole thing. So you see that Rabbi Shimon, regarding specifically about these doing partial acts, is much more mekel. So it doesn't make sense to interpret him here as the one who's machmir. Ella Rabbi Shimon ha'ata lashma'inan ad shichtov et Hashem kulo. So here too must be that if I intended to write Shimon, then I have to write the whole name Shimon in order to be chayav. Wait a second, but that doesn't fit his words, because all his words were interpreting these asa echat, and he said Can it be the whole name? No, me'achat means less than the whole name. So you can't say he's only chayav if you write the whole name. Taris ve'ma'achi, I can explain it as follows. Yachol shechtav et pasuk kulo, I might have thought, because I'm intending to write the whole pasuk, I'm writing, Shimon, but I'm going to continue with the whole pasuk. So therefore, me'achat says, even if I intended to write the whole pasuk, if I write one word, then it's chayav. So one word, that the word that I intended, I must write, and not shin mem. And that would make him more mekel than Tanakama. I would also fit with this Braita where he does say that you have to finish what you intend to. But to say to finish the whole pasuk, that's like a long-term goal. It's the short-term goal that you have to fulfill. Okay, now the Biyoseh, who we mentioned quickly, we're just going to go back to him and elaborate. The Biyoseh is the one that said it's not about writing, it's about making a mark. And then he went and said, V'asa achat, Biyoseh med v'asa achat, v'asa hena, pamim shechayav achat al kulan, pamim shechayav al kol achat ve'achat. That was the quote from the Braita. And Amar Biyoseh Rabbi Chanina, who's explaining what the Biyoseh said. I know it's the same name, but this is Amora explaining what this Tana said. My Tama del Biyoseh. What is he learning from this? How is he learning that? Achat me'achat. Hena mehena. Achat shi hena vehena shihi achat. So he's comparing, there's a lot of things to learn here. The word achat, the word from achat, hena, that word, and mehena. And so that brings them together. So you're actually going to end up learning 4 different things from here as follows. Achat, Shimon. So that means I know I'm chayav if I write the word Shimon. Me'achat, the mem on achat tells us Shem mishimon, just the word shin mem. From that, I'll also be chayav. Okay, the Biyoseh would agree in that case. I mean, he's the most mekel, even any 2 symbols. So, but he's going to agree in this case also because it has to do with intention. Henna avot. Henna is talking about the 39 avot melachot. Mehenna toladot. I might think only the avot. The mem says that which comes from the avot, I'm also chayav, even if I only do a tolada. Achat shehi henna. Now putting the words together, right? And when am I chayav? One, for many transgressions. Zedon Shabbat ve'shigigat melachot. When I knew it was Shabbat and I did many melachot, then actually it will be achat shehi henna, one for every single melacha. Right, because I knew it was Shabbat and I forgot each melacha, so then that's one. That would be many, each and every one. Hena shiachat, many. That is one chatat. She got Shabbat. If I forgot it was Shabbat, uzadon melachot, but I knew all the melachot. I forgot Shabbat, therefore only one for forgetting Shabbat. Okay, that's the Biyoseh. And now, Amar Biyuda, Masinu Shem Katan Mishem Gadol. I know we discussed it, Biyuda. We resolved his contradiction. But we resolved it by saying that's his rabbi's opinion in the Baraita. But Rabbi Yehuda's own opinion is Shem Mishimon. We have a small name that's part of a big name. Mida me, mem de Shem satum, mem de Shimon patuach. We have a big problem here. If I write Shin mem, I'm writing a regular mem, right? And that's called a mem patuach. But the word, that's if I'm writing the whole word Shimon. If I'm writing just Shem, meaning name, I would write Shim Mem Sofit. And so it's a different mem, right? And if I write Shin Mem with an open mem, that's not a word. No one would say, oh, that's the word Shimon. I don't know if you saw how, Trump is spelled in Hebrew with peh, with a regular peh, not a peh Sofit at the end, right? I don't know why. I guess that's indicating that it's a foreign word. Okay, so anyway, it's not similar. If I write Shin Mem, it's obvious I didn't finish the word. You can't call that a full melacha, a full word. Amar Rav Chisda, zot omeret satum b'asa'o patuach kasher. You know what? We can learn from this Mishnah, from Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, that if a scribe wrote something, it was supposed to be satum, it was supposed to be a mem sofit, and I wrote a regular mem at the end of a word, then the Sefer Torah is kasher. Right? If I write, irregular letters at the end of words, then it's okay. Right? Is that what we can learn from this? Well, we can try, but we have a contradiction. Metibe from a Baraita, uchtavtam. That's from Shema. We say uchtavtam. We should write Shehetehe kitiba tamma. You could split this into two words. Vechatav tam. Your writing should be perfect. What does it mean? What do you mean perfect? Shelo yichtov alfin ayin. Don't switch aleph and ayin. They don't look the same, but it seems in Eretz Yisrael they pronounce them the same. They didn't pronounce their ayin so well, and so they might get switched sometimes, like on our kids' homework. Ainin alfin. Don't switch the other way. Betin kapin. Kapin betin. Don't switch a bet and a kaf. Bet and a kaf look very similar. You can see here how they were ancient script, how they were written, and modern script also. So don't switch them. A gamin sadin gamin. Gimel and sadi also they look not in modern script but in ancient script they look somewhat similar. Dalit daltin deshin daltin those always look similar. Hehin hatin hehin hen chet is just just the tiniest bit of a line could make the difference between them. So make sure to write them well to distinguish. Vavin Yudin Vavin, that's always a problem. They generally in ancient times they wrote their yuds longer than we do, and so it's very hard to tell. And sometimes the vav are a little short, so it's hard to tell vavs and yuds. We have a lot of it in the Torah itself. Who's, he's, zainin, nunin, zainin. Right, those also just look like long lines. Tetin, pepin, tetin, pe and tet. So don't mix those up. Kifufin, pishutin, letters that should be bent, don't write them straight. This would be like the kaf and the nun that are written bent in the middle of the letter, but straight at the end. Or pishutin kifufin, or the other way around. Memin, samchin, memin. Don't mix those up. Right? They all look like circles. Situmin, pituchin, situmin. This is talking about the mem. Mem sofit is closed. Satum, don't write it open. And if it's open, you can't write it closed. So this is the main line we need because it means that shin mem, if I write it open and it's supposed to be closed, it's no good. Parasha petucha, lo ya'asena situma. Situma lo ya'asena petucha. If I have a paragraph break, this is a situma paragraph break. That you skip a few spaces and continue on the same line. Petucha is I go to the next line. These are throughout the Torah, and you have to make sure if you mess up, then the Sefer Torah is pasul. If you do one and it's supposed to be the other. Okay, this is very difficult. This is how Rambam had the biggest problem with this because it says he went around in Egypt and he says every Sefer Torah was different. Sometimes this says patuach, sometimes satum, patuach, and so he said I got to make order out of this mess, and that's why he turned to the Aleppo Codex. It wasn't yet called the Aleppo Codex, and he said this is going to be the one that will be the definitive work, and he decided halacha is you have to follow the Aleppo Codex for all the paragraph breaks. So this was the one that scribes had the most trouble with, and Rambam had difficulty getting consensus on it. Okay, but anyway, this is the source here that it's necessary to get it right. Ketiba keshera, or kataba keshira, or shekatab tashira kayoseba, or shekatab shelo bidjo. If you wrote something that is a poem. If you wrote a regular paragraph like a poem, my poems have a special form, or if you wrote a poem like a regular paragraph, also no good. They all have to be right. Or if you didn't write with black ink, or you write God's name in gold. You might think I'm doing a hidur mitzvah, but no good. You got to put those scrolls away. They cannot be used. Okay, so we see a lot of different laws, but the one most important for us is what we just said about the Shem and Shimon. Okay, who the Amar, when the Rabbi Yehuda said it's okay, he was saying, according to the following Tanah, ki haida Tanah de Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, Ne'emar basheni v'niskehem, bashishi unsacheha, bashibri kemishpatam, hare mem yud mem, mayim, mekan lemez lenisucha mayim min haTorah. Okay, so he's going to follow this paraita. This paraita is talking about Sukkot. And all the sacrifices of Sukkot every day is similar, and each paragraph ends a little bit differently. Some of the days end niskehem, and in the sixth day it ends nisacheha, and otherwise niskehem kemishpatam. Well, it's really strange if you're a Torah reader, right? You have to be careful with these things. So this Midrash says, I can derive from the ends of the words that this one, the second day of Sukkot, the paragraph ends mem. The next day, the sixth day ends nesacheha, emphasizing the yud, and this kimishpatam is mem, so that spells mem yud men mayim, and that teaches us that you should do a water libation. The Torah only tells us about a wine libation. Uniskim is talking about the wine libations, and for that reason, the Sadducees said you only have to bring a wine libation. But the Pharisees and the rabbis said you bring a water libation too. Sadducees say, hey, it's not in the Torah. So here's a midrash that says there's a hint in the Torah, although it doesn't say it. Anyway, we bring this because you see that although it's written with a closed mem, he's reading it as if it was an open mem because he's starting a word, mem, yud, mem. Now, this whole thing is a very far-fetched midrash, and you see that here, even here, it's only like a mikan remez, the nisuch hamayim. It's just a hint. It's not really derived from it. But anyway, the Rabbi Yehuda ben Midrash seems to think that even if it's a closed mem, you can read it as if it were an open mem. Umidepatuach vaso satum kasher, satum nameh, satum vasa patuach kasher. And since if an open one, if it's supposed to be open, and it's closed, it's okay. In other words, this one's supposed to be open, right, according to this midrash. So too, I can figure the other way, right? If it's closed and I make it open, that should also be okay, right? And so, therefore, the Yehuda, although the Braita up here said you can change them around, the Yehuda ben Betera seems to say that you can interchange the middle letter and the final letters, and so the Yehuda ben Betera is following that opinion. Okay, on the next step, we're going to see that this is not so simple, and we're going to need a more complex answer because we're going to say that famous statement, the ending letters were said by the prophets, and so it's not so easy to just come and say you can change them, but we'll leave that exciting discussion for tomorrow. Thank you very much.